and welcome back to the Claret Blue podcast. I'm your host, Dan Rowlinson, and I'm joined by our special guest once again, Dave Powell. I've forgotten your job title, but you're our football money man, is what I'm going to call you from now on. You came on a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago, to talk about the Villa accounts when they dropped, and we talked about PSR and the losses and all that kind of stuff. People loved that episode, and we're very grateful for you to share all the information very plainly and simply. We're going to try and do the same kind of thing again today, but this time in a more positive manner. We're talking Champions League, we're talking finance, we're talking sponsorship. First of all, Dave, how are you, mate? How's things been over the last couple of weeks?
Really good. Yeah, really good. Thanks, Dan. Now we've kind of reached the end of the season. All the pieces slot into place, and clubs know what they're getting, and they can start to plan effectively for the summer and whatnot. So yeah, summertime transfers, Euros bring plenty to write about, plenty to dive into from a financial perspective.
There is some questions from the audience that I'm going to get through as well. But first of all, let's just start plainly and simply with Champions League prize money. Worst case scenario, Villa will play 8 games next season in this new league phase. Let's say, and I don't believe this will happen, they lose all 8. They do the worst you can do in this format. What's the minimum finance that Villa will get from this? What's the minimum prize money?
Well, first off, I mean, in finishing fourth, they've already significantly increased their merit payment from the previous season, because the international rights are pulled together domestically and internationally. The media rights, sorry. So those are divvied out on a sliding scale down in terms of merit payments for clubs related to where they finish in the league. So for Villa finishing fourth, they're entitled to a bigger slice of that. It goes up accretively, 2.5-3 million every single position. So there's a nice sum to come from Villa for that. But specifically Champions League related, the prize money of the Champions League from this season, because we've got a reformed model now. So the old system of having several groups of 4 or 5 teams, that has now been replaced by the Swiss model, where it's a one giant league, 32 teams, and they'll play 8 games instead of 6. And so for qualification, you get a participation fee, and it's gone up. I think it's just under 19 million euros now, which is, as an exchange rate, I'm trying to think, it's probably around 15.5 million at the moment. So that's just for being there. That's for
16.1, Dave.
Oh, well, it's best to go to Travel X for your money exchange needs. So that's for competing, and that's just for competing in the Champions League, being qualifying for the competition itself. And then there's an additional 2 games than there was last time now. So you can look at this just from the pure perspective of the money you would derive from the Champions League itself. But also for clubs, it's important to note that they will have 4 guaranteed home games, which Champions League games, they're going to be sellouts at Villa Park for this. So I'm not... my guess, looking at what other clubs generate from match days, I imagine Villa's probably around 1.5 million to 2 million, that bracket, in terms of what they get from match day revenue. So when you start to factor in that, times 4, that money starts to become already more valuable than what it would be if you went to the very deepest stages of the kind of Europa Conference League, even or the Europa League. So it's a valuable competition to be a part of, and they're back in it. But there's kind of slight change to the other rules. So it used to be a case of you would have the TV market pool and your UEFA coefficients would be 2 separate things, which is how money's divvied up to clubs. So that has been replaced now by what's called a value pillar. So it's the value of the European rights, which kind of your own TV market brings. So the English market is obviously a strong market, which means that that Villa would be entitled to more. But the flip side of that is that it's done on a sliding scale again. There's 666 shares which go among the competing teams, and they're all given on a sliding scale in terms of kind of UEFA coefficient. So obviously Villa haven't been in the Champions League for a long, long time. They've been in another European competition which counts the UEFA coefficient, but they would be towards the bottom end of that. So the slice of the pie wouldn't be as much. But no, they've got all told, even without doing an awful lot. I think Newcastle this past season made around 30 odd million, just under. for their brief kind of sojourn in the Champions League. They had some great, less games again. So moving forward, Villa will have the chance to earn more, but it's a significant amount of money to be made. But that's you're operating on the worst case scenario here, as you say. That's them based on losing every single game, which I don't think is going to happen.
No, well, what is going to happen is they will win every single game. We'll talk about that flip side in a second, of course. Is it right that this finance that comes in, this 30 million plus, whatever it is, that'll be on next year's accounts? It doesn't help us for this transfer window that we now go, we've got kind of an extra 30 million to spend.
No, it'd be into next year. It just means it's nice for forward planning for Villa to know that it's always a difficult period for clubs who are either flirting with relegation or in terms of they're pushing for Champions League spots or they're going to be in the Europa League, because the value difference is huge. So when you're approaching the transfer market, it's much easier for mid-table clubs to kind of prepare for that kind of eventuality next season far earlier. Likewise, for Champions League clubs, this season, the top three was tied up fairly early. So those clubs know they can get, they can rely on that money for the forthcoming financial year. For Villa, a bit different. They, the transfer business would have changed moving forward a little, I imagine, based on whether they would have been the Europa League or the Champions League or not. But it just means it allows the club to effectively plan a bit further ahead. And really closes the door a little bit on some of the worries they had about PSR. All clubs are concerned. Most clubs are concerned about being compliant with it moving forward. This next year will be the final year of it before we move to this UEFA squad cost ratio. But clubs are just mindful of the kind of the teeth that were kind of sunk into Everton and particularly, and then Forest, etc. Probably shown that there is reason to, you have to take these things seriously. But I think, as I mentioned in the last time I was on, I think Villa will be fine. They'll manage to get themselves under it and do what they need to do. Keeping hold of the existing, stars and talent they have would have been key. And having Champions League football this season makes that task of selling Sunset, I suppose, far easier.
On the prize money, then, everyone is fully aware, or should be aware, that if you get to the quarterfinal or the semi-final, each kind of round that you progress, you get a pot of money for progressing through that. Is it also correct that you get money per win as well? Yeah,
it's actually diminished a little this season. It's down to just over €2 million a game for a win and about €700,000 for a draw. Nothing for a defeat, but that's offset with the fact there's 2 extra games. So if you win all your 8 games, then you will get the same prize money as last year, which is just under €17 million, I think, if you won all your games in the league. But the difference this time round is there is a bonus to be paid if you finish in the top 8 of this new league. It's a €2 million bonus. Top 16, €1 million bonus. So there's and obviously qualification for the knockout stages. Every single round you go through, the prize money grows and grows and grows. It's one of those which is, as you would expect any competition to do, success is rewarded financially. So but for Villa, I think even a relatively strong campaign in the Champions League probably sees them earn this time round pushing the 40 million mark. And when you start to take into account additional games, all that's, the pie gets bigger.
Yeah.
And it allows for the club to hopefully reinvest some of that money in terms of ensuring that this season wasn't a one-off and they plan for next season. That's the only way which you can ever really truly grow the club effectively, because Newcastle's time in the Champions League last season, or this season, sorry, as great as it was for the club, and it's not been a huge game changer in a wider sense because it's only been one season. Had they been able to, PSR effectively stopped them from really doing what they wanted to do and put their foot down on the gas and go for it this season, ensure that that last season's Champions League turned into 2 seasons, and then UEFA coefficients grow, all sorts, and then you end up becoming you're part of that elite group that can kind of rely on these sums to a greater extent, and they have more wriggle room when it comes to investment and transfers, etc. So key for Villa is ensuring that they're able to kind of make a solid push for that, at least for the Europa League. Again, the difficulty is when Champions League is pretty draining schedule. I mean, it's not. I mean, I know some clubs have treated the Conference League almost. I mean, it's been a serious competition for every club that's entered with it, but there's been less. It's not so much the goldfish bowl of the Champions League. So there is more inclination to maybe for some clubs to maybe try and get more game time for their fringe players in some of the earlier rounds. The way this Champions League group is set up, I don't think there's really going to be the opportunity to do that. So Villa are going to go into it with one of the smaller squads, I expect, certainly in terms of real quality. And that's going to be the challenge of how do you juggle a really high-level elite competition with the kind of what you need to do at home to kind of do what you did again last season. Now Chelsea may find that this season may be the one where they finally get back to form because they're a couple of years out with it now, and their focus will be solely on getting back in the Champions League next season. That's it. So United will obviously be trying to do. Manchester United be trying to do a similar type of thing. So be even more hotly contested next year, but obviously Villa are in the box seat for this season. It's great for brand, and hopefully the club can leverage this season with a good campaign. Greater commercial deals, all sorts, which ultimately it's not just the prize money. It's a bit like a kind of a Venn diagram, I suppose. It goes everywhere, and it's a case of you can earn money in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, we've spoken about the new format and how if you are going out in this first period, your European campaign is finished by mid-January, I think, off the top of my head. So you've got a kind of a run at the back end of the season to kind of pick yourselves up and really go at it for the league. Man United will want to be in the top 4, as you say, as Chelsea will be. It's on Villa to kind of lay down that gauntlet and say, well, we earned it last year. We've got to kind of do it again, really, to keep doing what we want to do.
I think they've also got, is there, if you think about the top 3, top 5 managers in European competitions, Unai Emery is I mean, he knows how to manage a European campaign. So that'll be. I'm really intrigued actually to see how he manages this Champions League campaign, this new format, because he knows the kind of nuances that exist between kind of playing in Europe and playing domestically. So really, really intrigued to see how that plays out. I mean, if there's a manager wanting to dugout for a European campaign, it's Unai Emery, right? So I think he'll know the stresses and strains that are placed on. This isn't his first rodeo, so he'll know what is required and kind of the energy that saps out the legs from European competition. So I imagine that's a large part of the transfer chatter in the walls of Villa Park this summer will be around how do they add good quality around the team as opposed to trying to find key players in positions, because you need strength in depth and you need the quality for a grueling season. So I imagine that'll be largely what they try and do. Better quality, larger squad.
This is something like Unai Emery's 18th European campaign in a row or something silly. Like the longevity at Europe is crazy. You got Villarreal obviously to a Champions League semi-final 3 or 4 seasons ago. So I'm not, as a Villa fan, not ruling anything out. Just we'll lose every game. It'll be difficult. Yeah, we all know it's going to be hard. But when you've got that manager and this set of players, you kind of, as a fan, you want to believe you can go all the way, basically, whatever competition you play in. I want to kind of jot up the numbers very quickly. I've got my whiteboard here and a pen. For my kind of aim, I think you want to get to at least that playoff round. You want to finish in that middle part of the table and kind of give yourself a 2-legged affair to try and get into the knockouts. I think that would be a realistic target. Yeah. So just remind me, how much do you get just for being in it? If you just for qualifying? Just
for qualifying. So we'll use your figures. I think you said £16.1 million.
So worst case scenario, Villa are going to get at least £16 million next season from the Champions League, right?
Yeah, and that's just money that is
just for qualifying, no game receipts
from qualification. You'll also get a share of this value pillar, but that could be, that will be dependent on. It will probably be relatively minimal for Villa, even though the English market is a strong one and they'll get more clout from that because of a lack of historical performance over the past 10 years or so in European competitions. Notwithstanding what's gone this season, that will help. They will be in the lower end of that. So I think the lowest team receives about €900,000 from that. So you're probably looking at maybe 3.5, 4 million, maybe for Villa as a rough guess from that value pillar. So you're already into the 20s.
Okay, let's say so on a minimum funds for Villa is going to say let's say 20 million for argument's sake. I think if you're going to finish in that middle part of the league system, you're probably going to have to win maybe 3 games and draw a couple. So let's say 6 million from wins and another million from draws. 4 of those at home, so you got your gate receipts of what, say, $1 million per game, something like that.
About that. I mean, it's always difficult to know because you never really get these things broken down. But but obviously European games don't count for your season tickets, so it's kind of walk up money, isn't it? So that's
tell me about it.
Something you don't account for at the start of the season, which is what makes it even more valuable because it's additional money rather than the season ticket money you've already banked. So I think 1.5 million might be a 1.25, 1.5 million is probably a fair conservative assessment.
Okay, so let's say another 6 million from receipts and food sales and all that kind of stuff, tickets, merchandise. Getting through the playoff round is another, obviously, home game, so it's a 2-legged affair, so we'll add another 1.25 on. Is there a prize for getting through to that knockout round as well, like a prize money for that?
There is, I've not got it in front of me, but it's usually from what it was like, because if the formats change, it was to qualification last year for the knockout stages. Brought you about €9 million, something like that, but it's a bit different this year. But there is a prize to it, so say I'd probably call it about 5 or 6 million. For argument's sake.
For my kind of rough estimations, that we win a couple of games, we draw a couple of games, we get through to this playoff round and we lose. That's what I've worked out on. We don't make it through to the last 16. That would net Villa just under, rough estimations, 40 million, which is pretty good going to kind of get through to that first little bit. Obviously, if Villa don't make it to that knockout round, they lose take another 7 million or so off of that as a rough guide. Villa would then to get through to the last 16. Obviously, then you're playing another game at home in a 2-legged affair. You've got further into the competition, so you get prize money for that, more tickets, etc. So obviously, goes without saying, the further you go, the more money you make. What's the maximum, Dave? I'm not saying we're going to win the thing, but if you did win the thing,
it's gone up from what it was last year to this year. So I think the maximum you could earn just in pure prize money last year was about €85 million. This year it's 111. Oh, wow. So for teams that go, this is if you win in every game, a flawless campaign, and there's probably 4 or 5 teams which may look at it and think they have a shot at that. But the money is huge, but that's not included in kind of gate receipts and things like that. As we were talking about commercially before, it's one of the more difficult things to do is it's always seen as it's a big win for your commercial partners when you qualify for the Champions League. For the more prominent partners that you're on your sleeves or your front of your shirts, yes, it is. But the Champions League sells its own commercial rights. So on a Champions League game, the advertising hoardings, the LED boards, etc., are all taken up with Champions League partners. So that's it's a difficult sell, that. But what you can do is, as you move forward, if with Champions League football, there's good leverage to try and break into new markets and grow a brand and appeal to new companies where you're very much on their radar as being part of that European elite. But in terms of match day branding, it's a bit more harder to sell.
There's a tweet I had from somebody who asked about away games, saying opening Villa Park for away games to get fans in to watch on the big screen could be a revenue driver. And somebody replied saying, you probably have to open it for free and you got to pay staff, so it's probably not as much as you think. But I like that thought of just thinking outside the box. This opens up new opportunities that Villa can just do more things. Like maybe they can do a ticketed thing where you can go and watch the away games at Villa Park and they sell, I don't know, 10,000 tickets and they make another 1 million from the away games then. Do you know what I mean? Like there's things that Villa now can try and do in terms of merchandise and whatever else to basically profit off of a good campaign.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I'm unsure of the the kind of the rules and regs around Villa Park in terms of what they're allowed to do in terms of holding additional events outside of football. So I'm not privy to that. I mean, I'm only speaking from a lot of my work has previously been done kind of Merseyside with the Echo, etc. And I know obviously it's a bit different there because it's heavily residential around there. But it's that they're limited to 6, I think, non-football events this season. I don't know what Villa Park's got going on this summer in terms of any music events, things like that. Unsure, but some of those are considerations. But yeah, I mean, logistically, you have to take into account that you do have to staff these events. It requires catering and whatnot. But if you've got the commitment to get 10,000 people in to watch a game on a big screen, and you can make a profit from that, a handsome one, then it's something which I'm sure will be under consideration. But again, I'm not too sure about the rules and regulations that exist around Villa Park.
Another question. This one's from Martin, who says, "Hi Dan, really interested / confused about whether there are or what are the differences between the Premier League financial rules and the UEFA ones. I've been reading up on the European rules and they seem stricter. In which case, what is the point in the vote to relax the Premier League rules for the teams that qualified for Europe?"
The Premier League will be moving to these UEFA rules from end of next season. But it's a version of these rules. It's not going to be directly in line with them. But the squad cost ratio rule for UEFA is basically it's what you spend on wages, your amortization costs for which is basically how you account for transfers in your accounts, and intermediary fees, minus revenue and player trading, etc. So that gives you a ratio, your squad cost ratio. Now, UEFA introduced this about 18 months ago, but it was done on a sliding scale. So you're allowed a 90% squad cost ratio in the first year 1, 80% year 2, down to 70% year 3. Now, we're still in 80% territory here, I think, and there is some leeway given to clubs who come into this competition. I mean, if you are, Manchester City, then you know that Champions League football's coming next season. And you cut your cloth accordingly in terms of those facts and figures. But for clubs like Villa coming in, there's an 80% rule that will exist, but obviously there is leeway in terms of clubs that may be over and above that. I think Villa will probably find themselves just skirting under that, if I'm honest. So I don't think it'd be too much of a consideration moving forward. When 70% becomes the kind of fixed limit as of the following season, then it's going to become more of an issue. But hopefully Villa will have that problem because it means they've qualified for the Champions League game.
Yeah. Final point then, and this is something we kind of talked about in the show that we did the last time. We were a little bit kind of skirting around the idea, or I was at least, of are you better off just kind of holding on to your best players, intentionally breaking the rules and taking a 6-point deduction or whatever, and thinking, well, we will make that up in the long run. The idea is probably, no, you shouldn't do that, is what we settled upon in the end. The final question from Matt, who says, given that the revenue that we make will depend on how we do, does it not make sense for us to wait until January or even next summer to decide if we need to sell a big player? So almost gambling on the fact of, right, we'll keep hold of everybody, because if we finish well in the Champions League, we can kind of deal with any problems next summer instead, rather than kind of preempting a problem now and dealing with it. But again, that kind of falls into the territory of like you knowingly breaking the rules a little bit.
I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue for us. I think the largest thing will be, as you said before, I think keeping the nucleus of the team together and adding some decent quality in and around it. I think that I don't think anyone's taking this PSR lightly now. I don't think anyone wants to no one's going willingly to take a points deduction hit here, especially if Villa are going for Champions League football again next season, or European football. You see how tight the league is. When you are the difference between not only qualifying for European competition, but also the merit payments, etc. You can lose plenty of money by doing this. It's far easier just to cut your cloth accordingly. If you need to sell some fringe players to be compliant, you do that. But yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, I don't think the club will be preempting anything too much. I think they'll know that they've got this nice financial bump coming in the next financial year, and they'll do just enough to ensure that they remain compliant and give Unai Emery a kind of a fighting chance to put a team out to compete on both fronts this coming season. But yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be thinking about willingly breaching the PSR rules.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all the questions I've got. Dave, thank you very much for joining me as always. Thanks everyone for watching or listening to this episode of the Claret Podcast. Stay subscribed and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.